Hello, everyone. How are you today? Setting boundaries is one of the most essential aspects of healthy relationships, whether personal, professional, or even casual. Boundaries represent the limits we establish to protect our mental, emotional, and physical well-being. When we let someone disrespect us or cross lines that make us uncomfortable, we inadvertently send the message that it's acceptable for them to continue their behavior. By clearly setting boundaries, we communicate to others that we value ourselves and expect to be treated with respect. Without boundaries, we risk losing our sense of self-worth and end up tolerating actions that harm us. When you say, "I expect respect," you are drawing a clear line in the sand. You're telling the person that there is a limit to what you will tolerate. This declaration is important because it eliminates any confusion about how they should treat you. Too often, people may unintentionally push boundaries because those boundaries were never clearly communicated in the first place. The moment you verbalize your expectations, you're making it clear that disrespect is not only unwelcome, but it is also unacceptable in your presence. In this way, you're protecting your dignity and sending the message that your respect is not something to be taken lightly. In a world where respect is often taken for granted, setting boundaries can be a powerful form of self-preservation. It's easy to get caught up in trying to please everyone or avoid conflict, but this behavior often leads to a lack of respect from others. When you set boundaries clearly, you give people a framework within which they can interact with you, one that is built on mutual respect. If someone crosses that boundary, it's no longer on you to fix the situation. The onus is on them to correct their behavior. This shift in responsibility can be incredibly liberating, as it prevents you from constantly absorbing negativity or rudeness. Setting clear boundaries also allows you to regain control of the narrative in any conversation. Many times when we're disrespected, we might feel like we're losing control of the situation, whether it's through anger, frustration, or just the sheer shock of being treated poorly. By stating your boundaries assertively, you take back the power. You decide how much of yourself you're willing to give to this interaction. Boundaries are a form of emotional self-defense. They act as a shield, protecting you from the harmful effects of others' negative behavior. When you are clear about your boundaries, you're not simply reacting, you're acting with intention. Additionally, clear boundaries help to build a stronger sense of self-respect. People who have strong boundaries are seen as confident and self-assured. They're not afraid to stand up for themselves or their values, and as a result, they attract people who understand and respect those boundaries. When you allow someone to disrespect you without setting boundaries, it creates a sense of imbalance in the relationship. But when you set your limits and expect them to be respected, you're fostering an environment of mutual understanding. You're teaching others how to treat you, and in doing so, you're encouraging healthier, more respectful interactions. It's also crucial to understand that setting boundaries doesn't mean being rude or dismissive yourself. Boundaries are about protecting your space and well-being, not about being confrontational or aggressive. The way you set boundaries can speak volumes about your character. By approaching the situation calmly yet firmly, you show that your standards for how you're treated come from a place of dignity, not defensiveness. Setting boundaries clearly isn't about punishing others. It's about ensuring that your needs and values are respected. It's an act of self-respect that encourages others to treat you with the same courtesy. Lastly, setting boundaries allows you to make better decisions about who you allow into your life and how you interact with them. Over time, as you become more accustomed to setting and enforcing your boundaries, you start to attract people who value you for who you are and not for how much you're willing to tolerate. You create space for relationships that are healthy, supportive, and based on mutual respect. The people who respect your boundaries will remain in your life, while those who continue to disrespect them will naturally fade out. In this way, setting boundaries is not just about the moment of conflict, but about fostering a long-term, positive environment for personal growth and healthy interactions. Staying calm and collected in the face of rudeness or disrespect is one of the most powerful ways to handle difficult interactions. It's incredibly easy to allow our emotions to take the driver's seat when someone disrespects us, but reacting impulsively often leads to regret. Anger, frustration, and hurt are natural reactions when we feel mistreated, but responding in these emotional states can escalate the situation rather than diffuse it. By choosing to remain calm, you demonstrate emotional maturity and control over your reactions, which is not only a sign of strength, but also one of the most effective ways to manage conflict. When we stay calm, we give ourselves space to think clearly. Often, in moments of stress, our minds can become clouded with emotion, and we may say things we don't mean or act in ways that we later regret. By taking a deep breath and remaining composed, we create a mental pause that allows us to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. This pause is essential because it gives us the opportunity to assess the situation without letting our emotions dictate our action. It allows us to decide on the best possible response. One that is assertive yet measured, firm yet not aggressive. Remaining calm also sends a message to the other person that you are not easily rattled. Rudeness and disrespect often arise from the other person trying to provoke you into reacting or losing control. When you refuse to react emotionally, it leaves the other person with nowhere to go. They are left with their own behavior to reflect on, while you remain steadfast in your sense of self-respect. The more you practice staying calm in the face of adversity, the more others will recognize that their attempts to ruffle your feathers are futile. This, in turn, can deter them from being rude in the future. Furthermore, staying collected allows you to maintain your dignity in any given situation. When you respond in anger or frustration, it's easy to lose sight of who you are and what you stand for. Our actions and words reflect our internal state, and when we lose our composure, we risk coming across as defensive, petty, or even as bad as the person who disrespected us. But when you respond with calmness and poise, you elevate the conversation and remind both yourself and the other person of your higher standard. You show that you are not defined by their behavior, but by your own principles and emotional intelligence. Additionally, remaining calm in the face of rudeness gives you a greater ability to control the outcome of the interaction. When emotions take over, it's easy for a conversation to spiral out of control, often ending in a negative or unresolved situation. However, by staying calm, you maintain the power to steer the conversation back to a place of mutual respect. You can address the disrespect without escalating the tension, and your calm demeanor will help diffuse the situation. This, in turn, opens the door for a more constructive conversation where both parties are able to express their thoughts without things becoming hostile. Staying calm also has a profound impact on your own well-being. Emotional reactions to rudeness or disrespect can be draining and exhausting. If we constantly allow ourselves to become upset or angry at others' behavior, we not only waste energy, but also carry that negative emotion with us. The longer we hold on to that anger, the more it can affect our mental and physical health. However, by staying calm, we prevent the emotional fallout from spilling into other areas of our lives. When we remain composed, we protect our peace and avoid unnecessary stress that could otherwise affect our mood and overall health. Lastly, staying calm and collected helps to break the cycle of negativity. Often, when we engage in heated arguments or respond in anger, we fuel the fire of conflict, perpetuating the cycle of disrespect. But by maintaining your composure, you interrupt this cycle. You're not feeding into the negativity. Instead, you're creating space for resolution. The person who disrespected you may realize that their rudeness is not having the effect they intended, and this can encourage them to reconsider their approach. By staying calm, you create an opportunity for change in the dynamic, and in some cases, you may even prompt the other person to apologize or rethink their behavior altogether. One of the most important principles to remember when confronted with rudeness or disrespect is that it's not about you. In many cases, the way someone treats you is more of a reflection of their own issues, insecurities, or personal struggles than it is about your character or actions. When we take things personally, we absorb their negativity, internalize it, and allow it to affect how we feel about ourselves. This can lead to feelings of self-doubt, frustration, or even anger, and ultimately detracts from our own well-being. Understanding that rudeness or disrespect often has little to do with who we are can help us maintain our peace and avoid being dragged into an emotional struggle that doesn't belong to us. Taking things personally is a natural reaction, especially if we are caught off guard or if the rudeness feels particularly hurtful. We tend to interpret others' negative actions as a direct reflection of ourselves, especially when we care deeply about the relationship or the person involved. However, the reality is that how others treat us often comes from their own inner world, whether it's their own unhappiness, frustration, insecurities, or even something unrelated to us altogether. When you don't take it personally, you recognize that their behavior isn't a personal attack, but rather a manifestation of their own internal struggles. This helps to remove the emotional weight of the interaction and allows you to respond without being triggered by their actions. When we take things personally, we give the other person power over our emotions. They become the ones who decide how we feel, and that is a dangerous dynamic to fall into. By understanding that their rude behavior is a reflection of them, not of you, you take away their ability to control your emotional state. This is incredibly empowering. You don't allow someone else's actions to dictate how you feel about yourself. You take back that power, recognizing that your sense of self-worth comes from within, not from external validation. This sense of emotional autonomy creates a strong foundation for resilience, allowing you to handle difficult situations with grace. Taking things personally can also lead to unnecessary stress and anxiety. When we internalize someone else's negativity, we spend time ruminating on their words or actions, questioning what we did wrong or why they treated us that way. This not only drains our energy, but also impacts our mental health. We become consumed with their opinions or judgments, giving them more space in our minds than they deserve. But when we stop taking things personally, we release the grip they have on our thoughts. Instead of obsessing over what was said or done, we free ourselves from the mental burden and allow ourselves to move forward, unaffected by the incident. Moreover, when we don't take things personally, we stop overanalyzing and assuming the worst intentions. Often, our minds can make things worse by imagining the rudeness was intentional or that the person is out to hurt us. But the truth is, many times, rudeness stems from the other person's bad day, their own frustrations, or a lack of awareness about how their behavior is affecting others. If we jump to conclusions and take things personally, we risk creating unnecessary conflict or distancing ourselves from someone who didn't intend to offend us. By not personalizing the situation, we leave space for understanding and forgiveness rather than assuming the worst. Additionally, not taking things personally helps you maintain a sense of empathy toward the other person. While it's tempting to become defensive when we're treated poorly, it's important to remember that everyone has their own battles. The person who is being rude may be struggling with their own personal issues, stress, insecurity, or even something they're dealing with in their own life that has nothing to do with us. When we remove ourselves from the situation emotionally and don't take it personally, we can begin to view the person with a sense of compassion rather than seeing them as an adversary. This shift in perspective can turn a negative encounter into an opportunity for greater understanding or even an opportunity to practice patience and kindness. Finally, not taking things personally allows us to focus on our own growth and emotional well-being rather than being bogged down by external negativity. If we constantly allow others' actions to define how we feel about ourselves, we become subject to their moods and behaviors. We risk allowing their negativity to cloud our self-perception, ultimately diminishing our confidence and peace of mind. However, when we choose not to take things personally, we maintain a strong sense of self and are able to navigate interactions with a sense of clarity and confidence. By choosing not to internalize their behavior, we create emotional space for positivity, growth, and self-assurance, rather than letting someone else's rudeness dictate our emotional state. Personal selflessness is an essential skill in maintaining healthy boundaries and protecting your self-worth. It is about expressing your thoughts, feelings, and needs openly and confidently without feeling guilty or apologetic. When someone disrespects you, it's crucial to assert your self-worth, not only to ensure the other person understands that you won't tolerate mistreatment, but also to reinforce to yourself that you deserve to be treated with dignity. Self-worth is the foundation of how we interact with others, and by asserting it, we show that we value ourselves, our feelings, and our boundaries. This assertion isn't just for the other person, it's for our own mental and emotional health too. At the core of asserting your self-worth is recognizing that you are deserving of respect, kindness, and fairness. When we allow others to disrespect us without standing up for ourselves, we are implicitly sending the message that we don't value ourselves enough to demand better treatment. However, when we assert our worth, we send the opposite message, that we know who we are, we recognize our value, and we will not tolerate behavior that diminishes us. By doing so, we not only demand respect from others, but we also reinforce our own belief in our inherent worth, which strengthens our overall sense of self-esteem. Asserting your self-worth isn't about being confrontational or aggressive. It's about being clear and firm in communicating your needs and boundaries. Often, when people disrespect us, it's because they have not understood or have failed to recognize our limits. By calmly and assertively stating that you expect respect, you are creating a space where your standards are clear. This clarity not only prevents future disrespect, but also sets a tone for how others will treat you in the future. People are far more likely to treat us with respect when we show that we have clear, unwavering boundaries and expectations. Moreover, asserting your self-worth is an act of emotional self-care. When we fail to stand up for ourselves, we often internalize the disrespect, which can erode our confidence and lead to feelings of shame or self-doubt. Over time, this can have a detrimental impact on our mental and emotional well-being. By asserting your worth, you are prioritizing your own emotional health. You are telling yourself and others that your peace of mind, self-respect, and dignity are non-negotiable. This proactive approach prevents the emotional fallout that often accompanies mistreatment, allowing you to preserve your sense of self and your inner peace. One of the most powerful aspects of asserting your self-worth is that it empowers you to take control of the situation. When we allow others to treat us poorly, we feel helpless and victimized. We may become passive, believing that we have no control over how we're treated. But by asserting your self-worth, you reclaim your power. You actively take charge of how you're treated, and you shift the power dynamic in your favor. Instead of allowing the disrespectful person to have the upper hand, you position yourself as someone who is confident and strong enough to protect their boundaries. This shift not only affects how others perceive you, but also boosts your own confidence and sense of agency. It's important to remember that asserting your self-worth doesn't mean demanding perfection from others. No one is perfect, and we all make mistakes. However, it's about setting the standard for how you expect to be treated and drawing the line when that standard is crossed. By asserting your worth, you acknowledge that while others may slip up or behave poorly from time to time, you will not accept consistent disrespect. This creates an environment of mutual respect, where everyone understands that boundaries are to be respected and personal dignity is non-negotiable. Finally, asserting your self-worth has a ripple effect in the relationships around you. When you stand firm in your boundaries and assert your needs, you create an environment of respect, not only for yourself, but for everyone involved. Your assertiveness teaches others how to treat you and sets a standard for what is acceptable in your relationships. As a result, the more you assert your self-worth, the more you inspire others to do the same. This creates a healthier, more supportive dynamic in all your interactions. It encourages respect, accountability, and the acknowledgement that each person's value is paramount. One of the most effective ways to handle disrespect is by being direct, yet not confrontational. When someone disrespects you, it's essential to communicate your boundaries and expectations in a way that is straightforward but also composed and non-aggressive. Often, people fear confrontation, and as a result, they either remain silent or respond in a way that escalates the tension. However, by being direct, you ensure that your message is clear while avoiding unnecessary conflict. This method allows you to assert yourself without turning the situation into a battle, fostering a constructive exchange instead of a destructive one. Being direct means expressing your feelings and expectations in clear, unambiguous terms. Instead of leaving room for interpretation or hoping that the person will figure it out on their own, you state exactly how their behavior has affected you. For example, saying, "I don't appreciate being spoken to like that," directly communicates the issue without room for misunderstanding. This eliminates any vagueness and sets the tone for a conversation based on respect and understanding. When you are direct, the other person knows exactly where you stand, and there is no doubt in their mind about what behavior is unacceptable. However, while directness is crucial, it is equally important to avoid being confrontational. Confrontation, in this context, is not about expressing your concerns, but about doing so in an aggressive, hostile, or combative manner. When you become confrontational, you risk escalating the situation into an argument where emotions take over and nothing gets resolved. Instead of fostering mutual respect, confrontation tends to deepen the divide between you and the other person. Being direct allows you to express yourself firmly, but without the added hostility that would make the interaction unnecessarily tense or adversarial. To avoid confrontation, it is vital to maintain a calm, controlled demeanor while being direct. Your tone of voice, body language, and facial expressions all play a role in how your message is received. If you remain composed, the other person is more likely to mirror your behavior, which can help diffuse any potential escalation. For example, saying, "I would appreciate it if you didn't interrupt me," in a calm and steady voice without raising your voice or using aggressive body language conveys authority and assertiveness without triggering defensiveness. This approach shows that you are not seeking conflict but are simply addressing a concern that needs to be acknowledged. Being direct without being confrontational also requires a certain level of emotional intelligence. You need to be able to express your thoughts and feelings without resorting to personal attacks or blame. Instead of saying, "You're always rude to me," which can come across as accusatory and inflammatory, you might say, "I feel disrespected when you speak to me that way." This slight shift in phrasing makes the statement more about your experience rather than an attack on the other person's character. It encourages them to reflect on their actions without feeling personally attacked or defensive. The goal is to communicate how you feel without attacking the other person's sense of self, which fosters a more open and constructive dialogue. Being direct, but not confrontational, also helps you maintain control over the situation. When you become indirect or evasive, the other person may not fully grasp the gravity of your feelings, or may even misinterpret your hesitation as weakness or indecisiveness. By speaking directly, you assert your control over the interaction and signal that you are confident in your boundaries. The other person may initially resist, but they will likely respect your clarity, which will help prevent further disrespect. In the long run, being direct about your needs will create a sense of accountability that encourages healthier communication in your relationships. Lastly, being direct but not confrontational allows you to manage the relationship in a healthier way. By setting clear expectations and addressing disrespect when it happens, you avoid allowing it to fester. If you remain silent or vague, the other person may not realize the impact of their behavior, and over time, the issue could grow into a larger problem. By addressing it directly, you give the person an opportunity to change their behavior and improve the dynamic between you. You also protect your own emotional well-being, preventing the buildup of resentment or frustration. Direct communication is an essential skill for maintaining boundaries and creating relationships where respect is mutual and upheld. One of the most effective ways to deal with someone who is disrespectful or rude is to avoid engaging in their negative energy. It can be incredibly tempting to match their level of negativity, especially when you feel personally attacked or disrespected. However, doing so only fuels the cycle of negativity and escalation. By refusing to engage in their negative energy, you take away their ability to provoke you and maintain control over your emotional state. Instead of reacting emotionally, you can choose to maintain your composure and avoid being drawn into unnecessary conflict. When someone is rude or disrespectful, they are often seeking a reaction, whether it's validation for their behavior, a chance to assert dominance, or simply to provoke an emotional response. By engaging in their negativity, you give them exactly what they want, your emotional investment. When we react impulsively, we hand over our power and control to the person who is disrespecting us. This can leave us feeling drained, upset, or even regretful afterward. However, if you refuse to engage in their negative energy, you deny them the satisfaction of knowing they've rattled you. You maintain your emotional autonomy and remain unaffected by their behavior. Remaining neutral or disengaging completely can be a powerful form of self-preservation. Negative interactions often have a way of lingering in our minds, especially if we get caught up in the emotional storm of the moment. If we allow someone's rude comments or disrespectful behavior to stir up our own negativity, we end up carrying that energy with us long after the interaction has ended. This can leave us feeling frustrated, angry, or upset. But by not engaging with their energy, we protect ourselves from absorbing their negativity. We prevent it from affecting our emotional state and can continue on with our day without being weighed down by someone else's bad attitude. Moreover, disengaging from negative energy allows us to maintain our dignity and self-respect. Engaging in someone else's negativity often leads to a loss of composure, and we may say things or behave in ways that we later regret. This can damage our reputation or undermine our sense of self-worth. On the other hand, when we refuse to match their energy and remain calm, we show that we are in control of our emotions. We show that their disrespect or negativity does not determine how we respond or feel. This not only protects our peace, but also reinforces to others that we have high standards for how we expect to be treated, regardless of their behavior. Refusing to engage in negative energy also helps us break the cycle of escalation. When we respond with anger or frustration, we often feed into the conflict, causing it to escalate further. This can create a toxic dynamic where both parties are constantly trying to one-up each other or get the last word. Instead, when we disengage from their negativity, we remove the fuel for the fire. The person who is being rude or disrespectful is left without an emotional response to feed off of, and this can cause them to rethink their behavior. Over time, this can teach them that their attempts to provoke you will not be successful, which can ultimately lead to more respectful interactions. Disengaging from negative energy also sets a powerful example for others. When we remain calm and refuse to engage in negativity, we model emotional intelligence and self-regulation. This can influence those around us, whether it's colleagues, friends, or even strangers, to adopt a more measured approach to conflict. By refusing to participate in hostile or disrespectful exchanges, we create a space where people feel more inclined to treat each other with respect and civility. People often take cues from how we handle situations, and by demonstrating that we won't engage in negativity, we promote a culture of mutual respect and constructive dialogue. Another key benefit of not engaging in negative energy is that it frees up our mental and emotional space. Negative interactions can often leave us ruminating on what was said, overanalyzing the situation, or feeling resentful. This can drain our energy and affect our ability to focus on more positive or productive aspects of our lives. However, by refusing to engage, we preserve our mental clarity and emotional well-being. We can quickly move on from the interaction rather than allowing it to linger in our minds and interfere with our overall mood. This allows us to maintain our sense of balance and focus on what truly matters, rather than getting caught in a toxic cycle of negativity. Finally, choosing not to engage with negative energy empowers us to choose our battles wisely. Not every disrespectful comment or rude behavior requires a response. Often, the best course of action is to let it go and not allow it to affect us. This doesn't mean we are passive or weak, but rather that we are strategic in how we allocate our emotional resources. When we refuse to engage, we conserve our energy for situations that are truly deserving of our attention or emotional investment. Over time, this practice allows us to become more selective in how we respond to others, ensuring that we don't waste our time or energy on conflicts that are ultimately unimportant or unresolvable. Knowing when to walk away from a situation is one of the most powerful tools in maintaining your emotional well-being and self-respect. In many instances, staying engaged with a person who is being rude or disrespectful only serves to prolong the negative interaction and potentially escalate the conflict. The ability to recognize when a situation is no longer productive or healthy and to walk away is an essential skill for protecting your peace. It's not about giving up or allowing the other person to win. It's about recognizing that continuing to engage would only cause further harm to both parties. Sometimes, the best response is to simply remove yourself from the situation. Walking away from a disrespectful person doesn't mean that you've lost the argument or given up your dignity. In fact, it often demonstrates a great deal of self-respect and emotional intelligence. It signals that you are unwilling to engage in a toxic dynamic and that you value your own peace of mind more than continuing to fight an unwinnable battle. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is disengage and give yourself the space to collect your thoughts and emotions. This gives you the opportunity to reflect on the situation without the pressure of continuing to defend yourself, and it helps you avoid getting drawn into a cycle of negativity. In addition, walking away allows you to take control over the interaction. Disrespectful or rude people often rely on pushing your buttons to get a reaction. They may continue to provoke you, test your patience, or try to manipulate the conversation in a way that benefits them. By walking away, you remove their ability to influence your emotional state. You regain control over how you choose to react. Instead of feeding into their behavior, you demonstrate that you will no longer tolerate mistreatment and that your peace of mind is more important than engaging in fruitless conflict. You have the power to choose how much of your time and energy you are willing to invest in the interaction. Walking away also helps you avoid saying or doing something in the heat of the moment that you may later regret. When we are upset or hurt by someone's disrespectful behavior, it's easy to become reactive. We may lash out, say things that are hurtful, or act in ways that don't align with our true values. This can lead to further escalation, making it harder to resolve the situation. However, by walking away, we give ourselves the opportunity to cool down and reflect before saying anything we might regret. This pause not only prevents further harm, but also allows us to respond more thoughtfully if and when we choose to re-engage. Furthermore, walking away allows us to protect our emotional energy. Conflict, especially when it is ongoing or unresolved, can be mentally and emotionally exhausting. Engaging with someone who is rude or disrespectful can leave us feeling drained, frustrated, or anxious. By choosing to walk away, we spare ourselves from the emotional toll that prolonged conflict can take. We create space to recharge and focus on things that bring us peace, joy, and fulfillment. This helps us maintain our mental health and emotional resilience, enabling us to approach future situations with a clearer mind and greater composure. Knowing when to walk away is also a sign of emotional maturity. It requires the self-awareness to recognize when a situation is beyond repair or when a person is unwilling to change their behavior. Sometimes we may feel the need to argue or convince the other person to see things from our perspective. However, this can often be a futile endeavor, particularly if the other person is not open to discussion or unwilling to change. Walking away shows that you recognize this and are not willing to invest your time in someone who isn't ready to engage in a respectful or constructive manner. It demonstrates that you are more concerned with your own emotional health and boundaries than with winning an argument. Lastly, walking away is an act of self-preservation that allows us to set clear boundaries in our relationships. By removing ourselves from situations that are toxic or disrespectful, we communicate that we will not tolerate mistreatment. This sets a precedent for how we expect to be treated in the future. People will begin to understand that when they cross the line, they risk losing our attention or engagement. Over time, this can lead to healthier, more respectful interactions as individuals recognize that we are not afraid to walk away from negativity. This helps to cultivate relationships where mutual respect is prioritized, and it sends a message that we value our well-being above all else.